Hello everybody, this is Fernando for the latest Ghosts and Spirits video. Alright, let's go ahead and let's do another entry here. This one yet again based on one of your new suggestions. This one actually being something that was part of a suggestion, but when I was reading the information associated with that ghost, the location that the ghost was there at actually interested me even more. This is because this is a location that apparently has multiple ghosts within it. In fact, it's so interesting and fascinating for me. I may just do that thing I've done in the past where first I've done videos on my channel here, a lot of times based on your suggestions, and then I realized what a great place to visit on my own, such as the case in the past with Fort Concho, and then there was that haunted park located there in Arlington, Texas, the Cemetery of Lost Children, and others. So maybe this is something that I'm going to do as well. But you're looking at a picture of it here, and for all intents and purposes, I'm going to call this video The Many Ghosts of the Haunted Hotel Galvez. So let's go ahead and let's talk about this fascinating location, and then I'll give all the info that I can on the many hauntings associated with it. Plus, anyone that's actually local and has seen this hotel in person or stayed on there, I love to always hear your comments on there too. So here's essentially what that is. So the Hotel Galvez has been around for quite some time, over 100 years in fact. It's located there in Galveston, Texas, hence the name Hotel Galvez. And as you can see in some of the pictures throughout the video, pretty much right there, right next to the coast itself. I'm sure it's pretty beautiful to look at from the outside, probably even beautiful from the inside as well, considering its historic stance. It's a 226-room hotel, definitely used by some of the past major influences or important people in the world, including Frank Sinatra has stayed there, Dean Martin has stayed there, even former President Franklin D. Roosevelt apparently used it as a temporary White House at the time. But despite all of its beautiful facade, at the inside, its history in other words, there's some grisly stuff that occurred around it, and that may in turn have led to the many ghosts that infiltrate within its location. So what had happened was in the 1900s, the early 1900s, there was a infamous storm, something that occurred in terms of a item like a very, very large either tropical storm or some hurricane that went by, and it ended up causing a huge set of damage around that location. In fact, it's interesting when I was reading this info because it tied in with yet another area that I visited in the past in Galveston. You might have seen my video on it before, the Mayfield Manor. I remember there they were talking about that storm as well. This was a storm, a great big one that came through, and when that occurred, it caused many, many deaths. This was, my apologies, I keep saying storm, it's a hurricane. My apologies, a hurricane of 1900 that ended up causing those deaths. And around that area in the Mayfield Manor, they have their own hauntings, and they attribute it to that hurricane. So ever since then, it looks like this Hotel Galvez also has many hauntings, and many of them are tied to that hurricane as well. So here's some of the specific hauntings, including some no descending order or no ascending order, the various ones that you'll realize there. Number one has to do with the Lovelorn Lady. This is something that ties into the notion of a classic person committing suicide or some other form of death that causes them to go haunt that place, and usually it's tied to a love that's lost. In this case, there was a woman by the name of Audra. She was there in the 1950s. It turns out she was going to be wedded, like in other words, she was going to be marrying someone that was a mariner who was out at sea at that time, somewhere over there in the port of Galveston. Well, the story goes that just before the wedding was going to happen, these soon-to-be newlyweds, there he was out in the sea, there she was in the hotel, specifically room 501. Keep that in mind here in just a minute. As it turns out, though, a big storm came in. She thought that it was the worst, that could have happened to her spouse, that something could have occurred to him. She was absolutely just trying to find out as much information as possible, and then she realized the worst did happen. News came back that her fiance's ship actually went down. It had capsized, and the news further came back that every single hand was lost. So in other words, no survivors when it comes to this catastrophe. So there she was in room 501, absolutely just devastated with this news. And she was so overcome with this type of sadness that she actually ended up hanging herself within the room itself. That's at least one legend. Another one states that she actually hung herself in the west side of the hotel, somewhere over there. The key thing, though, was it was either in room 501 or it was in one of the other parts at fifth floor nearby room 501. But ever since then, her ghost haunts that location. And what makes it very tragic even more so is the fact that a couple days later, her fiance came back. He actually did survive that capsizing, and of course at that point she was unfortunately deceased, and that's why her ghost frequently comes through that fifth floor, is because she in turn is still reliving those tragic set of circumstances involving her fateful hanging, and of course realizing later on that it was all for naught. Now she was dead, and now her soon-to-be husband, her fiance, was in turn very grief-stricken. It was just an all-around horrible situation. But if you stay on that fifth floor, room 501 specifically, that's where you'll have a pretty good chance of encountering the ghost of Audra. People state, especially those that work there, state that they'll know they're within her area because all of a sudden there's a chill that comes about that location. There's also some slamming of doors. Televisions start being turned on and off. Lights as well seem to flicker on and off in that weird, creepy fashion that you see in movies, of course. And then also there's a light that comes from a room that people know has nobody inside. So in other words, it's a vacant room, it's an empty room, probably no guests, lights off and so on. And yet there's a strange light that's emanating from it, probably through the bottom of the door. And then that's when people, of course, are wondering what's going on. But yeah, room 501 tends to have that type of spiritual activity, something that if I went to that hotel later on, I would try to see if I could specifically stay in room 501. So that's at least one story, again, associated with Audra, who is also known again as the Lovelorn Lady. Now, another sighting that happens to be around there is the first floor bathroom. Apparently, if you go there, there's a bathroom located near an area called the music hall. That's where people get this quote-unquote very creepy vibe that's associated there. It turns out that there was a guest, somebody who knows who she was, name and so on, age, or when this happened, but sometime in the past, she was using a tub or a pool that was nearby, and then at that point, she was in there and she ended up dying. I don't know how essentially that occurred, but the way the story goes, it could have been something involving like a suicide, or it could have been something else involving some other accidental death. But either way, though, people that go into that bathroom state that the lights go on and off. They hear very loud footsteps as well. They hear very loud breathing. And then also apparently a ghost of a man also is there, something along the lines of him stating to get out. So when you have that type of stuff there in that combination in that bathroom, that's definitely something that you don't want to play around with too long. But that's another ghostly sighting that's there. And then yet another one, this is probably the most tragic one at all. So as it turns out, there was, in that great storm, that hurricane of 1900, there were some orphan asylums that were nearby the hotel itself. They were there. They were just being operated by the Sisters of Charity is what they were called. And when this great hurricane was coming by, there was an attempt to save as many of those children as possible. Obviously, right? Like there was going to be something where this storm could have caused so much damage, and so everyone was trying to prepare for it. I don't know exactly why they wouldn't have left at that point. Maybe it just came as suddenly as possible. Remember, 1900s, there's very little indication in terms of predicting the weather back then and trying to figure out what's going to happen in a couple of days, not like today's weather forecasts. So maybe this did come all of a sudden, but when it did, the sisters that were there tried to save as many of the children as possible. This included getting some ropes, tying it around their waists, and then also tying it around the children's waists as well. So imagine like one long rope essentially attached to many people. I guess the idea was trying to make sure that if they held on to something together, then the holding on to things and then also the rope holding on to them would help keep everyone close by and hopefully not get anything as far as damages or flying away or having other type of catastrophe. Unfortunately, it did not work. In fact, the theory is that having those ropes tied together actually caused even more damage. I don't know how. Maybe it's with the idea of the ropes causing, like whenever the wind is hitting the bodies that hard that the ropes is causing almost them to suffocate, let's say within their stomach area, like it's tightening and so on. Who knows? But either way, though, get this, 90 children, and also 10 of those sisters ended up passing away from that great hurricane. What a horrible situation. Imagine coming up to that afterward, after the storm passes, and you look around and you see all those bodies. There were absolutely multitudes of these remains found near along the beach of the Hotel Galvez. And on top of that, because of the situation and the circumstances involved, they were pretty much just left there. Like, in other words, they were left there but buried underneath the ground wherever they were found. So the theory goes that somewhere there nearby the Hotel Galvez, that there is a mass grave there, and then that's another cause of the phantom children. So this is what people have stated happened, especially with the ghost of a little girl. They state that this little girl loves to frequent the hotel lobby and the gift shop area, and then also the staircase. She actually appears in front of people, like to the point that people think she's a real girl. There she is, bouncing her ball in some circumstances, and in other circumstances, even construction workers have seen this little girl, thinking that she might have been a girl that was lost or left unattended. They went to the front desk and then they explained the situation, but then it turns out that there was no girl there, that she had disappeared afterward. And on top of that, some of those other poor children that were lost from the great storm, people hear them running about, laughing about the hotel, playing on the piano, as I imagine kids would, where it's just slamming on the keys and then not having any kind of actual music, but instead them just having fun, and then otherwise just creating havoc throughout the halls like you could normally expect children to do so. But again, there are no children there. So those are some of the other ghosts that you'll encounter within this hotel. So as you can see, there's a lot of them, right? First you have that lovelorn lady, then you have that bathroom ghost, or potentially ghosts as well, and then finally you have the children, the little girl, and then several other children that go about that location too. So fascinating stuff. Definitely a place that I would like to go visit one of these days. Perhaps stay at overnight, or do it with the ghost group I'm in, Spectra, and then see what happens afterward. But if anybody has any more info, anything else I might have missed, then please post those comments below. Anyone stay there at the Hotel Galvez, and maybe you have your own haunted experiences, then please do so. Please post those comments. One last bonus ghost there as well. Those children that I was mentioning earlier that were lost within the hurricane of 1900. It turns out Sister Catherine is one of those ghosts as well. She was one of those sisters that was there trying to make sure that everything was safe, that the kids were saved, but she ended up passing away too. So that's where people state that they in turn see her apparitions too. So lots of fascinating stuff. I definitely predict that it's another situation where I'm going to be talking about the video here, and then in the future I'll be doing some live streams and so on from the hotel itself. All right, everybody. Thanks again as always. Take care. Bye.